That brings us to our final conversation of Inside the Fashion System, which will touch upon one of the hot button issues in fashion today. It's already come up this morning with Dries Van Noten, the idea of cultural appropriation and the business of culture. Back in May, when Alessandro Michele sent out a striking look at his cruise show for Gucci, the internet erupted in uproar as one of the looks seemed to reference the designs of one Dapper Dan, the legendary Harlem designer known for his own knockoffs and interpretations of high fashion brands in the 1980s and 90s. But now, people were accusing Gucci of the copying. The Vice website screamed out, "Gucci ruined culture by suing Dapper Dan. Now they're ruining it by ripping him off." And there were more challenges of cultural appropriation all over social media. Then, in an interesting twist, later in the year, Gucci and Dapper Dan's studio announced that they would be entering into a new partnership, and that Dapper Dan was going to be featured in Gucci's new men's tailoring ads. So to help us navigate the murky and uncertain waters of cultural appropriation and the business of culture, I am pleased to invite the man and legend himself, Dapper Dan, to sit down with our own king of culture, Tim Blanks, and Leila Fataar, founder of Platform 13, who has worked in cultural branding for over 20 years.
I'm really glad to be talking about this issue with two experts because it is a very, very thorny one, I think. But your story, Dan, you honestly couldn't make it up. It's like I hope it's being made into a movie at some point. But your relationship with the great fashion houses, how it's evolved again is incredible. I think right now, the issue, there are people who come back at the accusation of cultural appropriation and they say, no, it's cultural exchange. You're actually in a point where you are in a major cultural exchange with Gucci, aren't you?
Yes. In my community, we have a different lexicon that we use to describe what I do. Like, you guys like, bricolage or collage or appropriation is something that we use. And like the introduction I just got was like bootleg, and how we talk about it in Harlem is like there's bootleg and then there's knockoffs and then there's that, but they're knock-ups, so it's a difference. Now, in appropriation, that's something myself and the people that I cater to in my community never felt that that's what was taking place, because what I did was with European fashion, the European fashion and cultural animal, and the inner city fashion and cultural animal, I took both of these animals and extracted the DNA from both and used the chromosomes from each of them to create a separate and different animal altogether. So when people saw my creations in the street, they say, wait a minute, that's not Gucci. And then the people in the community also realized that this is something that they never saw before. So a new animal emerged that we began to talk about as like, this is that subculture that was being born at the same time as hip-hop music. So the two were the opposite sides of the coin, and they went global. And having said that, I'd like to thank Gucci and Alexandra Michelle for offering me the platform to introduce, my contribution to fashion globally. And I'd like to thank Alexandra, Alicio, and Robert, who are here today, representatives of Gucci, about that. But we never saw it as appropriation.
What's your take on this whole story? It's a very unique one.
It really is, and I'm from South Africa, where we had no opportunity to be anywhere near luxury brands at all. I'm from apartheid South Africa. We were segregated, etc. So for us, actually, what was really interesting is we were really influenced by Black American culture, and we loved it when he was out there creating something that we felt was reflective of us too. And it wasn't such, we didn't feel it was an appropriation as well from our side. For us, it felt like actually for the first time we could see something that we could wear, because we were, in sportswear and all sorts of things. And for us, it was awesome, actually. And actually coming from Africa, and this whole idea of cultural appropriation now is really interesting for me personally. Because for me, it's about respect, and it's about, I guess, if you're coming from a place like where I come from, possibly where Dan came from, where there's no opportunity to create something new, is just what you've got to do. Whereas I think appropriation is about someone who's got ability to just drop in and drop out when they want to bring back. I think for me personally.
I think with what Dan, you could say that what Dan was doing originally was celebrating
Yes.
heroes,
Yes.
celebrating his heroes in
It's
a way.
coveted, yeah.
And there's something about appropriation which suggests a power relationship,
exactly.
that the powerful appropriate the powerless. There's something that just in that term, I think, the way it's being used now anyway, it's an accusation.
And I think for me, it feels like if you've got the privilege and the power to be able to drop in and out of something and make it a trend when actually it means so much more to the people where it's coming from, then it feels slightly like appropriation. I think if there's an exchange, or if there's a way of having a conversation with the culture that you're trying to be part of and get them to be part of what you're trying to do, then it feels maybe like a different thing. It's a very fine line. It's really blurry.
Well, I think in this case, Gucci's done something remarkable by bringing you on board, actually bringing you into the fold to create something together.
Exactly.
That's one way in which you compensate.
It's respect.
It's respect. What else can companies do when they're? I know that, as I was said earlier in the day, Loewe's had an issue with using these Ecuadorian motifs, folk motifs on bags. The accusation was that they should have used the original artisans to make the bags.
I agree.
And I think that Loewe has now the money that's being generated by this is going into a fund. It's a curious situation when there's a sort of, I suppose, the original bags are like things made for tourists.
And I think, and I think it's as I said, it's a really blurry conversation. I'm glad that we're talking about it because it's really important. I think it's about respect, and I think it's about going, this is, it's like Burberry, for instance. They copyright their check. That's the same thing as going to an artisan who's, that should be copyrighted as well. It's just about going, how do you work with the people who are creating something that means something for them? And I do feel also, personally, that there's some parts of cultures that are sacred, and actually you don't need to go there. There's other parts you can have a conversation about and create something new with, in collaboration with the artisan or with the culture or whatever it might be. But it's just about conversation. It's about community.
Yeah, community projects that you can create with the makers, the original makers.
Exactly.
Well, what you did, Dan, was you created a Dapper Dan look. You didn't look at something and say, "Oh, there's a Vuitton copy" or anything. You saw an actual Dapper Dan look. So when Gucci did it, people would say that's where originally people might say that's not Dapper Dan, that's Gucci. Now they were saying that's not Gucci, that's Dapper Dan.
Well, Alexandra is these two parallel universes where Alexandra was creating these incredible outfits, and in the other parallel universe, I was doing the same thing, and what Alexandra did and what Gucci did was to bring these two parallel universes together. So I don't feel like it was said that Gucci knocked off Dapper Dan, and it got to seem like a knockoff knocked off a knockoff.
Bootleg of a bootleg, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But So initially, what I thought I was doing, like this whole thing about grafting two cultures and creating from those two cultures something new. Like you take a horse and you take a donkey and you make a mule. So this mule that I created became something just of its own entity, And so when Gucci came along and said, "Listen, you can bring that mule to our stable," and so and today we have this partnership going. So my take on this is that I'm happy the way people are approaching, and I'm glad that I have this global audience that's we can enter in the narrative about what appropriation really is.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
Agreed.
used one of my favorite words in fashion, which is bricolage.
Yeah.
When you were doing your original stuff, what was your inspiration at that point? What did you have in your head? It was a time when people like Gautier and Westwood were doing their bricolage. So how was that? Did that influence you at all?
Well, when I took a look at it, I said, when I looked at Gucci and I looked at, Louis Vuitton and the major brands, and I saw like what this could be, how they interpret it through my culture, like to jazz it up, to improvise in another way that's is never been done before. So I just took it on, looked at it, played with the symbolism and everything until I came up with something that didn't look like people would know that this is not a major brand. This is not the exact brand, and I continued to do that until it developed into what it is today.
Do you think you were misunderstood?
Yeah. Yes. I think the problem with fashion is like I don't see in fashion. I don't think there's any ugly fashion, and fashion, like I often say, that there's a weak or strong in fashion. There's no right or wrong in fashion, and the strong determine the course that fashion is going to take. And the community I come out of, we don't have the resources, so we have to create as best we can.
Yes.
And this leads to what people might call appropriation, but what we call is a new animal altogether.
But incredible ingenuity. You mentioned hip-hop culture, and if you think about how that sound was created, there was no technology in that sound, in scratching and bootlegging and remixing and so on. It was so of the hand. And it seems to me that there's a whole different lexicon to describe the creative process. There isn't that strange premium attached to originality. What is originality? I mean, in this day and age, what is originality?
Well, things are changing now, and people are, what we did in the beginning to satisfy each other is turning out to be different for what we do to satisfy the world. And then it goes back to being weak or stronger. Now, when I started out creating these ideas, I had the whole hip-hop community at my door. And so as a result of this, the strong forces came in, and now the rappers and the people of that nature, they work for the major brands now. So that stifles the creativity, because now the major brands is going to say, we want to go in this direction or that direction. So this initial beginning point has changed, and so the whole creative process has changed. So it leaves it open for a new cycle to take place.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Dries, whether you felt that in all these changes, that fashion's lost a little of its humanity.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
That fashion has lost a little of its humanity with all the changes in fashion, the speed, the size of the industry. Whether the human touch that was so important in what you did, and in the beginning of hip hop as well, whether that's been lost a little bit.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like everybody is doing what they first saw, and everybody is trying to capitalize on what first took place. And the variety that took place when I first started out is not there anymore. Everybody is concerned about the almighty dollar now, so they're not, the creative incentive is not there. They just want to do whatever it is that will get the money. That's something that wasn't taking place when I started out.
So there's a sort of loss of idealism then, in a way.
Yes, to a large part it is. It's a loss of idealism. And it's like when you look at all the brands that were started by, people of color, they all crashed. There's no powerful brand still in existence that was created by people of color. That's because everybody kept following everybody else. You know, and so that ingenuity is no longer prevalent. So that's why it takes another revolution within among people of color to expand on that again.
And do you feel that you're a trailblazer in that context? Like now this situation with Gucci, what could it turn into for you, do you think?
This, for people of color, is phenomenal. I was offered many times, you know, the opportunity to collaborate with different brands. But if it wasn't going to be one of the major European brands, I wasn't going to do it. What I felt was that Marc Jacobs and the rest of the top designers, if I can be accepted by a brand on that level, this will make a difference for all people of color around the planet. So this projection that I'm involved in now has such dignity involved in it, like I can move on, like Marc Jacobs or one of the other major designers. So this sends a message to people of color that, okay, we can finally do this. So to me, this is a historical thing that's taking place, and Gucci should be commended for it.
Are you friendly with Andre Walker?
Andre Walker?
Do you know Andre Walker?
I think
He worked with Marc Jacobs. It's just you brought him up, and they had a similar relationship with your relationship with Gucci. So I'm just wondering if you knew him. Because he is just coming back with the same kind of presentation as you, the same sense of mission that you have now.
Yeah.
How do you think this will translate for other people who are looking on, maybe feeling a little bit disenfranchised by what they see in the fashion world?
Currently?
Yes.
I think it's a really interesting time in the fashion world because fashion, at least for me, has always been about expression and ability to be able to do something. And I think there's a big difference actually between luxury fashion and fashion that has the energy of creative for me. So if you look at the grime movement now and you look at all these the next generation coming through, I think that's a really exciting time. And I think they disenfranchise with fashion because it feels so unapproachable for them. So I think, you know, what Dan's doing is really great. What Virgil's doing is really great. What Heron's doing is really great. You know, what ASAP's doing is really great. That's what the future is, and that's a really fantastic place for everyone. And with the internet, you know, you're now able to have a bigger communication even from places like South Africa, where I'm from, and that's really exciting. So I think it's an exciting time. I'm optimistic about it, obviously. I think it's a difficult time too, because, you know, as Dries was saying, you know, automation, faster, harder, sales, you know, that does affect creativity, but I think if we can find a way to use technology to enable what we do instead of sort of decide what we do, then I think we might get somewhere. And that's cool.
Do you think we're on the brink of a revolution?
We're doing it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The amazing thing that transpired with myself is that I never interned with any major company. Yeah. I never had any contact with the fashion industry whatsoever. Everything was done organically from the grassroots. So, and that makes a difference to people who come along after me. They're going to say, wow, he did it, and he did it like that. He didn't have to, you know, go up that staircase. He created a staircase of his own, and that's what makes the difference. And that's the inspiration that people who come behind me see and want and aspire to be.
Thank you very much. It's a good thought to finish on.
Thank you.